Welcome to Golden Girl, a space where we dive deep into health, healing, connection, and community. I'm your host, Becca Golden, and this podcast is all about sharing and documenting my journey. Each episode, we'll discuss topics like health and wellness, what I'm learning in therapy, work-life balance, relationships, community, and all the ways I strive for more aliveness and presence every day. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Golden Girl. Today's episode, I'm going to be talking about lipedema, and this is an episode that is long awaited. It is being recorded by popular demand because I started posting pictures of my legs with lipedema on TikTok, and they get millions of views, and I get thousands of comments from you guys wanting to understand what I'm doing to care for my lipedema. So most of this episode will be talking about my own lived experience with lipedema. I will not go deep into the science behind lipedema, but I'm just going to talk about it from my own point of view as someone who is not a medical professional. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a person who has lipedema. I'm going to talk about all the different practices that have worked for me and pretty much just everything that I wish I had known when I first discovered that I had lipedema. The timing of this episode is also really interesting because I have chosen to get lipedema removal surgery, and my first surgery will be taking place next week. So I hope that as part of this episode, you're able to learn about all the different ways that you can manage your own lipedema and your symptoms and your quality of life without surgery, because that's what I've done for several years, and a lot of people choose not to have surgery. If you are somebody who has lipedema, I really encourage you to try out all of the practices and things that I name in this video, because even after I have surgery, I will continue doing all of these same practices to manage my lymphatic system and my lipedema. And everything in this video applies to anybody who has lipedema, whether you've had it removed surgically or not. One more thing before I dive in is that lipedema is seriously understudied, and there is not enough known about this condition. This is something that affects millions of women around the world, and I really believe it's finally getting the attention that it deserves. And my hope is that in the next couple of years, we know so much more about the condition than we do now. Part of the reason that I have been posting my legs on social media is because I know it increases awareness about this condition, and the earlier that you can recognize the symptoms in yourself, the sooner that you can start to intervene and do these self-care practices to improve your quality of life, improve your symptoms, and prevent it from progressing. Because lipedema is a progressive disease, and the science says that you cannot reverse it. I think on today's episode, you'll hear that the science and what they claim to be true might not be completely true for everyone, and there are lots of interventions that really can dramatically improve the way your lipedema looks, the way your lipedema feels, the way that the tissue appears in your legs or your arms or wherever you have the diseased tissue. And even though the science says that you cannot reduce lipedema and you cannot reverse your stages, my own personal experience has been quite different in that regard, and I have tons of photos to back this up. So all I will say is that the science is not quite there yet, and they are still learning so much about this disease, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what else comes out. I do think that we are going to learn more about this condition in the future, and unfortunately, I also think that we're going to start seeing more of this condition in the future, because this is a day and age where we are spending very little time in the sun. We are more sedentary than ever before, and we are surrounded by more toxins than we have ever been surrounded by in the history of humanity. So unfortunately, I think lipedema is going to become incredibly more common, but that also means that there will be more awareness brought to this condition and more research and more opportunity to improve quality of life and the condition in general for anybody who's suffering from it. For the purposes of this episode, I'm going to primarily talk about lipedema in the legs. However, many women have it in their legs and their arms, and they tend to have it in other places in their body. I will also reference throughout this episode that lipedema is happening in women. However, there are some cases where lipedema will happen in men. So just keep that in mind for your own personal situation. I'm just going to be talking about how it occurs in women, and I'm mostly going to talk about the legs, even though it does occur other places, and it's not only in women. So, what are the symptoms of lipedema? Lipedema is often going to result in disproportionate fat tissue in the body. So, if you have lipedema in your legs, you might notice that your legs are a lot larger than the rest of your body. Lipedema is going to present a lot like cellulite. A lot of women who have lipedema in their legs will notice that their legs are a tree trunk shape. You, a lot of times, are not going to have as much definition at your ankle, and you're not going to have much definition at your knee. For me personally, my knees have always been very fatty tissue. Ever since I was about 14 years old, my knees are not defined at all. They just have like a lot of tissue around them. So it looks like my knees are just really fat. And personally, I have pretty well-defined ankles, but a lot of people with lipedema will notice that they do not have ankles. They will have cankles. So if your legs are a tree trunk shape, and you don't have a lot of definition in your legs, you might be somebody with lipedema. Something else to keep in mind is that lipedema is symmetrical in nature. So both of your legs are going to look like that. If you have just one leg that you're noticing is a lot bigger than the other, that is likely something called lymphedema, and you should definitely see a vascular surgeon to look into that. Lipedema is known to have symmetrical appearance, and you're just going to have excess fat in those areas. Some other symptoms of lipedema are going to be easy bruising because with lipedema, you have fragile capillaries, so you're going to get a lot more bruising. And there's a lot of times some pain and tenderness to the touch. A lot of times lipedema can get confused for cellulite because they do look similar on the surface, but there are differences. Cellulite, you're not going to have that easy bruising. And also, if you look closely at the lipedema texture, a lot of times you can see nodules. So nodules are like these dense, fibrotic clumps of fat. And the way that I've always pictured this is by thinking of cheese. So regular fat tissue, the consistency is like queso. It is like fluid. There aren't clumps in it. And then lipedema fat tissue is like cheese curds. So if you've ever seen cheese curds, it's like clumps of abnormally shaped fat, and they're dense. They say that the nodules are high in estrogen and they're releasing inflammatory chemicals. So a lot of women with lipedema are estrogen dominant and have symptoms of estrogen dominance. A lot of women tend to also have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome or some kind of hypermobility. And a lot of women have experienced symptoms of MCAS, which may not actually be MCAS, but it might actually just be your body's inability to process histamine because of all the inflammation that the lipedema nodules are sending to your body. Many women with lipedema will also be diagnosed with chronic venous insufficiency or some kind of vascular condition, and many women with lipedema will experience increase of swelling. So with my own personal example of the swelling, I never knew it was abnormal to swell like this. I would go on walks with my friends, and when we would get back from the walk, my legs were exhausted, my legs were swollen over my shoes, and their legs looked exactly normal, like before we had even left for the walk. So I didn't realize that was abnormal, and that's why I think these are important topics to talk about, because if your legs are swelling by multiple centimeters in circumference when you go for a walk, you need to look into that. That is not a normal reaction to walking. And then finally, the big one is that lipedema tissue is resistant to diet and exercise. This is something that I see all the time online. Women are being so hard on themselves because they are not sure why they're not losing weight. They don't know why they've lost weight everywhere else, but their legs and their arms won't budge. That is because lipedema is said to be resistant to diet and exercise. And I want to be really clear about this topic. When they say lipedema is resistant to diet and exercise, they mean lipedema is resistant to a caloric restriction and lipedema is resistant to excess cardio. But in my personal experience, lipedema responds really well to certain dietary changes and certain types of exercise. So a lot of women notice actually huge improvements when they switch to an anti-inflammatory diet, whether that's keto, whether that's carnivore, whether that's a Mediterranean-style diet, whatever an anti-inflammatory diet looks like for your own personal body, taking into account bioindividuality, that anti-inflammatory diet can oftentimes improve your lipedema dramatically. So when they say lipedema is resistant to diet and exercise, they're not talking about dietary changes. They're talking about restricting your calories. But so many women are having huge improvements in their tissue from making dietary changes. Keto worked really well for me for a long time. Now it doesn't work so well for me anymore, but that doesn't mean that it won't work for me again in the future. I have explored various different types of styles of eating, and I encourage you to do the same thing. Try out different styles of eating. I used to think that there was no way I would ever be able to eat carbs without binging on sugar. But I was wrong. My body actually can utilize carbs quite well, and it doesn't cause me inflammation. So just a quick recap, it can have pain, swelling, easy bruising, tree trunk shaped legs without a lot of ankle or knee definition, lumpy, clumpy looking fat that is resistant to traditional diet and exercise, and lots of swelling, potentially overlapping with chronic venous insufficiency or vascular conditions, hypermobile conditions, connective tissue disorders, etc. So now that you know what symptoms to look out for with lipedema, let's now talk about what actually causes it. And I'm not going to get into the deep science. I'm just going to go really high level. Lipedema is a genetic condition that is triggered by hormones and influenced by inflammation. So let's break down what that means. It is a genetic condition. For some women, they know that all of the women in their family and all of the women in the generations before them all had the same legs. They all looked like tree trunk legs. They thought it was just how their genetics work. For me, I did not know where my lipedema came from until my paternal grandmother showed me pictures of her mother. So this is my great grandmother on my dad's side had lipedema. And I didn't know this until we looked at pictures. My sisters both probably have lipedema. My mom doesn't have it. My mom's legs look fantastic. And none of the women on her side of the family have lipedema. My dad is one of two boys, so there was really no way for me to know that it came from his side of the family until his mother showed me pictures of her mother's legs. So that is how I know now where my lipedema came from. It is genetic. It's going to run in your family, but you might not be able to identify where exactly it came from in your family lineage. Personally, I also believe that this is a genetic thing that gets triggered or not triggered. So that brings us to the second aspect of this. So lipedema is influenced by hormones. A lot of women notice the lipedema appears or presents itself after some kind of big hormonal event. So a lot of women, this is when they get their period or after they've had a baby or when they go through menopause. For me, this happened when I was living in toxic mold. When I was 14 years old, my family was renting a house and we ended up having to move out of it because there was black mold all under the kitchen cabinets, and my bedroom was right next to that. So if you aren't familiar with toxic mold, mold is an endocrine disruptor, and that means that it is altering your hormones. It's influencing your hormones. And for me, that's how my lipedema was triggered. It was triggered by that, but it does run in my family. So perhaps if I never lived in the toxic mold, perhaps I would have gone most of my life without having my lipedema actually triggered. Or maybe once I got my period, I would have had the lipedema triggered at that time. Or maybe I would have gone most of my life without lipedema. And then after I get off of my birth control, I start to have lipedema. So everybody's situations are going to be different, but the hormones are going to be the thing that tends to trigger it. A lot of women will say that they never noticed that they had it, and then all of a sudden something shifted and it appeared, which is how it happened with me. Okay, so just going back, this is a genetic condition that is triggered by hormones and influenced by inflammation. So this is that last aspect. It is influenced by inflammation. So on my personal lipedema journey, so much of this has been just managing inflammation. That is why an anti-inflammatory diet is going to be so effective, because you're really just trying to remove as much inflammation from your body as possible. And we are getting bombarded by inflammatory aspects of our world all the time. You can live the most non-toxic lifestyle possible. And if you have lipedema, your lipedema nodules are causing you to have more inflammation. So if you have lipedema, you just need to really be constantly managing your inflammation. And we'll get into that too. So we've covered now what the symptoms of lipedema are, what causes lipedema. Let's now talk about how to get a diagnosis and why you might want one. Many doctors don't know what lipedema is. And it's not their fault. It's not taught in medical school. And this is just something that is a newer condition that we don't know a whole lot about. So getting the lipedema diagnosis is pretty difficult to get. And it's not always going to do much for you. It doesn't really change a whole lot about what you do to manage the condition. If you are somebody who has health insurance and you know that you can get a diagnosis and have your doctor write you a prescription for medical grade compression leggings, a compression device, lymphatic drainage massages, if you want to get all of that covered by insurance, then you need a diagnosis. However, having the diagnosis does not guarantee that your insurance will cover all those things. And I'll talk about that too. So just know that whether or not you get the diagnosis isn't necessarily going to change anything about the way that you manage your lipedema. It just might give you an option to potentially get some of your expenses covered by insurance. It's not going to give you any access to anything additional that you don't otherwise have access to. So now let's say you do decide to pursue a diagnosis. There are a lot of lipedema Facebook groups and places online where you can actually find out which doctors are familiar with lipedema. These different support groups are just an awesome resource. I'm not a big Facebook person, but there are lots of Facebook groups that talk about insurance coverage and getting diagnosed and which doctors are familiar and things like that. So I definitely recommend checking that out if you're looking for a doctor in your area that is already aware of lipedema and has a record of diagnosing people. In my case, what I did was I went to lipedema.org and I printed out all of the diagnostic criteria and I went to my primary care doctor with that information. I explained to him what it was. I walked him through the exam and he gave me the exam and the diagnosis. With the diagnosis, he was able to write me a letter that said that it was medically required for me to get lymphatic drainage massages and wear medical grade compression and potentially consider surgery in the future. However, unfortunately, I then submitted these lymphatic drainage massages to my insurance and they denied them anyway. And I tried to get medical grade compression and they denied that anyway. So I ended up paying out of pocket for all that stuff anyway. And I'm not sure how helpful that diagnosis was in terms of getting things paid for, except I'm now pursuing surgery and having that diagnosis from a couple years ago is helping build my case so that I can hopefully get my surgery covered by insurance. So for me, I went to my primary care physician. A lot of people can go to a vascular surgeon. Some vascular surgeons are also not familiar with lipedema, but it is more likely that they know about it because so many women with lipedema also have some kind of vascular condition like chronic venous insufficiency. Okay, so now the moment you've all been waiting for, I'm going to talk about all the things that have helped me improve my lipedema. These are things that have made a dramatic difference in my quality of life and my pain, my symptoms, the size, texture, and appearance of the lipedema. These are things that have just changed my life entirely. And it's not just good for lipedema. These things are good for anybody. So if you're listening to this podcast and you end up not having lipedema, these are things that are still going to be beneficial for you. I'm going to put these in two different categories. So the first category is going to be managing my lymphatic system, caring for the actual swelling and the lymph and the tissue directly. And then the other category is going to be managing inflammation in your whole body holistically, systemically. The number one thing that I do, my absolute non-negotiable, is wearing medical grade compression every single day. And I tend to alternate between two brands. I have the CIRS brand. It's an Italian brand that you can buy on Amazon or from the Italian brand directly, and Lipoelastic. Lipoelastic are the leggings that I wear when I'm lifting weights because they're not see-through. So between Lipoelastic Active and CIRS, those are my two go-to pairs of medical grade compression. I will put them in a link in the show notes in case you want to just buy them directly through my link. And these are like game-changing. I have bought probably like 30 pairs of these pants because I wear them every single day, non-negotiable. Unless I am like going swimming, I will be wearing compression because it's made that big of a difference in my swelling, in the tissue. it's just helping keep everything contained so that you're not getting all sorts of swelling all the time. And some compression leggings are going to have little ridges on them that help with your lymphatic system too. And in this whole category, the idea is to get your lymph moving because lipedema is influenced by stagnant lymph fluid. So if you are sitting around all day, if you're in a desk job, your legs are just still all the time. And your lymphatic system doesn't have its own pump. You have to be really moving your body in order to get your lymphatic system moving. And we live such sedentary lives these days. So it's sometimes harder to get your lymphatic system moving if you have a desk job or if you have lipedema, then your mobility is potentially compromised as well. So anything that you can do to get your fluid moving and get your body moving, get your body to have movement in the tissue is going to be beneficial for the lipedema. One of my favorite resources is Leah Levitan from the Lymph Love Club on Instagram. I'm going to have her on the podcast. Leah is just such a wealth of knowledge for actually moving your body in ways that feel good to you. You don't have to go through some very specific rigid movement program. Just like dance around your kitchen, move your body, jump around, dance, jump, do whatever movement is accessible to you and feels good to you. Like the movement that you're going to do is the most helpful thing. It's so much more helpful to just like jump around your bedroom or like shake out your limbs if you're actually going to do that versus going for a 10-minute walk every day if you're not going to do that. For me, actually, walking was not super helpful because it would just make my legs swell more. So I never actually found a lot of success with daily walking. The number one is compression. Number two, lymphatic drainage massages. Now, this is something that you want to make sure that your lymph nodes are open before you do any lymphatic drainage massages. There's so many resources online. I really recommend doing the Big 6 every morning. That's going to get your lymph flowing first thing in the morning in the day. Lymphatic drainage can be a really powerful tool just to reduce the swelling and to get your lymph moving because when you have lipedema, your lymphatic system is going to be somewhat impaired. I also like to put my legs up the wall at the end of a long day, especially if I'm having more swelling, if I've been traveling. Putting your legs up the wall and just sort of like assisting in bringing down to the groin area and behind the knees where there's big clusters of lymph nodes. That has helped reduce a lot of the swelling for me, and I found a lot of success with that. So we got compression, manual lymphatic drainage. I also like to use a gua sha stone to help with the lymphatic drainage sometimes. There are lots of different tools that you can use. Dry brushing is a great way to get your lymphatic system going. I also have a rebounder. A rebounder is basically like a mini trampoline. You can just jump in place. I tend to just like bounce on it instead of actually jumping on it. It's a little bit easier on my joints. And again, it's just using gravity to get your lymphatic system moving. Because if you're jumping up and down, it's just getting that tissue moving, which is kind of the name of the game here. You just don't want to have stagnant fluid in your legs or your arms or wherever it is in your body. The more you can get your body moving, the less likely you're going to have stagnant fluid, the less likely that your lipedema will become flared. And then the last one for the lymphatic focused, tissue focused section is a little bit controversial, but the last one is a vibration plate. So the reason this is controversial is because a lot of people with lipedema are already having their histamine bucket and toxic buckets pretty much at the capacity. So if you already are at capacity with how much toxins you have in your toxin funnel, how many histamines your body is able to manage and clear, then when you get on a vibration plate, sometimes it can give you a histamine reaction that your body doesn't have capacity to clear out. And so that might look like getting a rash or hives or like heart palpitations. My advice, if you're going to try out a vibration plate, is to try it low and slow. So maybe try it out for a minute, see how your body feels. If your body feels like, oh, this was really helpful, maybe try to increase the time and then wait a couple days. Wait for your body to calm down. I also recommend doing it in your follicular phase if you're somebody who has a menstrual cycle. Your follicular phase is when your body is going to be more resilient to stress and histamine is going to naturally be lower because your estrogen is lower. So when you can do these things at times when your body feels more resilient, that's always going to be a good way to go about it. And then just try it out and see. I've noticed that in my late luteal phase, like right before I get my period, it is not a good time for me to be doing a vibration plate. even though in my late luteal phase, that's when my body actually needs the assistance of transporting lymph through my body the most. So like getting my body all shaken up at that time would be most helpful for me. However, it is also when I have the least capacity for vibration in my body. My cells just get a little panicked. And I know when I do a vibration plate in my late luteal phase, I am very likely to have some kind of histamine flare. So every body is going to be different. And I think with a vibration plate, if it sounds like something that you would actually use regularly, then it has the potential to really make a dramatic improvement in your tissue because it's going to shake up some stuff that's been stuck. However, if you're a more sensitive individual, if you have EDS hypermobility, if you are somebody that you know that things just tend to set off your nervous system, maybe skip the vibration plate or just do it really gradually and pay a lot of attention to how it affects your body. So that's the end of this first section, which is just all the things that I'm doing to actually manage my lipedema tissue itself, actually like working with the tissue, manipulating the tissue, jumping up and down. These are things like my body is doing or that I'm putting my body through to help manage the tissue itself. However, if you are only doing those things, it is going to be an uphill battle. You really have to do both sides of this. So on the one hand, managing the tissue itself. On the other hand, it's going to be managing your inflammation systemically in your body. And that means making sure that your body has the right vitamins and minerals, making sure that you're eating an anti-inflammatory diet, making sure that you're getting the right type of exercise for your body, making sure that you're removing toxins from your environment, that you're detoxing estrogen properly. All of these things are going to be so important to managing your lipedema because it's managing your own body's inflammatory capacity. So I'm going to go through one by one all the things that I have done for my body that have helped me manage my inflammation. The very first thing that I did is remineralizing. And if you have not gone and listened to the podcast episode where I talk about my whole health and healing journey, how I got sick, how I've been getting better, I really recommend that you listen to that. It's an hour long, but it is quite a story. And if you have lipedema, you might have a lot in common with everything that I had gone through. It is the story of how mold had really made me so sick and how I was an overachieving people pleaser and trauma and the lipedema and everything. It really just all culminated into one picture of my own health. And after posting on TikTok about this, I know that so many people can resonate with this. Like I get thousands of DMs of people who are going through this exact same situation and it played out in a really similar way. So my own experience of managing my own inflammation is really driven by the story of what happened to me, but it is something that a lot of people can relate to and resonate with. And what worked for me might work for you too. So in my personal experience, remineralizing was the very first thing that I had to do. Now, this was something that I had to do because I was so depleted. I didn't know I was living in toxic mold for so long. And what the mold does is it's going to be an endocrine disruptor, so it's going to mess up your hormones. But the first thing it does is it depletes you of your minerals. So when you're living in mold, you are constantly in a state of stress and you don't know it. This is like underlying stress. This is like a state of fight or flight that you might not notice, but your body notices. So when you constantly have this toxin that you're breathing in, the mold, your body is going to be on high alert and that will deplete all of your minerals. And if you want to know more about minerals, I have a couple podcast episodes about that as well. But for the purposes of today, what you need to know is that your body needs vitamins and minerals to make hormones and to have healthy fascia and healthy lymphatic system. If you don't have the right vitamins and minerals in balance, then your fascia is going to get dehydrated. Your connective tissue is not going to have the ability to repair. You're going to get blood vessel ruptures and fibrosis, and it's all going to lead to this picture of health that will allow lipedema to thrive in, which is really what we're trying to prevent because you can't necessarily prevent lipedema from happening. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen, but you can create the environment that makes it really difficult to present itself. So part of that means that you're getting all the right vitamins and nutrients and minerals. A lot of women have had success taking an antioxidant called pycnogenol. There was a recent study that came out that showed that the women who were taking pycnogenol, I think it was 150 micrograms per day for 60 days had a dramatic improvement in their symptoms, their quality of life, their leg heaviness. So that's like so exciting that that study exists. I started taking pycnogenol and it made me have such intense GI symptoms that I had to stop. So pycnogenol was not the right fit for me. There are other companies that have come out. This one company sent me their stuff. It's called Lipera. And some of my friends online have been taking Lipera and have great results. I haven't taken it yet, but they did send it to me and I'm definitely going to try it out because it's vitamins and minerals and different things that can support your body. There's quercetin, there's CoQ10. Those types of components are what are in these supplements. So you can take different types of supplements, but I would say the very first thing that you should do is get an HTMA, a hair tissue mineral analysis. That's going to tell you where your mineral levels are at. So this isn't just like, oh, vitamin C and vitamin D. This is your minerals. So selenium, boron, manganese, like those are things that you need to have in the right ratios to make sure that your body has what it needs to have healthy tissue in the first place. So on my journey, remineralizing was such a huge part of my recovery and my lipedema improvement because I was lacking all the vitamins and minerals that my body needed. And because I was lacking those vitamins and minerals, I wasn't able to make the right hormones. And lipedema is triggered by hormones. So when I was missing all those vitamins and minerals, I wasn't producing the hormones my body needed. And that was just like the perfect storm for a lipedema explosion in my body. The next thing on my list is also something that is specific to my journey, but it might apply to you as well. This is something that I really recommend women with lipedema get checked for because I have a theory that lipedema is largely caused by chronic inflammatory response syndrome. This is not something that the science supports. This is something that I have come up with on my own. I really believe that CIRS, chronic inflammatory response syndrome, is a hugely contributing factor to lipedema. And I say this because CIRS can be caused by exposure to a biotoxin. So that's things like mold, endotoxins, sewer gas leaks, Lyme. All of those types of things can trigger what's called chronic inflammatory response syndrome. And I'm going to do multiple podcast episodes on CIRS that go into a lot more detail about that. But after I found out that I had CIRS, it completely changed the way that I think about all the inflammatory processes in my body. So I got a CIRS diagnosis. I am now working through a CIRS protocol. It's a whole ordeal. But if CIRS is something that you think you might have, I highly recommend you follow the Biotoxin Lady on Instagram. Lauren is such a wealth of knowledge on CIRS, and she has a lot of resources that can point you in the right direction. She has an online community that you can join. And if you're looking into getting actually tested and treated for CIRS, you can reach out to a company called Moldco. That is where I did my first CIRS protocol. And I really think that as I continue to heal CIRS, it's going to totally change the way that my body experiences lipedema because CIRS can influence your pain receptors. So you might not have experience with mold. You might think that you have never had a mold exposure, but I just highly recommend looking into either detoxing mold, getting a CIRS diagnosis, remineralizing. These are things that might help support your body because your body is an inflammatory environment for this lipedema, and you want to make sure you're removing as much inflammation as possible. So now in the second category, we have remineralizing, we have detoxing mold or CIRS protocol. Other things that are going to help detox your body, remove excess toxins are going to be taking an estrogen detox supplement like DIM. DIM is just something that helps your body detox any harmful estrogens. If you have lipedema, it's very likely that you're estrogen dominant, so taking something like DIM might help you. Or if you want something more natural, you could take something like Crucera, which is like broccoli extract, and it's basically going to help you detox estrogen the same way. Something else I do regularly that helps me tremendously is infrared sauna. I have noticed that my body does not do well in a regular sauna, and that's because heat is often a very big trigger for a lot of people's lipedema. So I try to avoid high heat, but I go into an infrared sauna at a very low heat, and the red light therapy combined with the detoxing benefits of an infrared sauna have helped my body recover, detox toxins. And again, this is just to make sure you're eliminating all the toxins from your body as much as possible so that your inflammatory environment is lowered. The next thing on this list is going to be an anti-inflammatory diet. This is going to look a little bit different for everybody. Some people have experience with keto or carnivore and they swear by it. If a ketogenic diet or carnivore diet is working well for you to manage your lipedema, I say go for it. There are concerns with a carnivore diet long-term on your gut microbiome. There are concerns of a ketogenic diet on your gut microbiome long-term. My personal philosophy on this after having done a ketogenic diet for over 7 years is that the ketogenic diet worked very well for me at that time of my life. And now I'm in a different stage of my life where I think a different style of eating is going to be most supportive for me. So I encourage you to find whatever style of eating is most supportive for you, the most anti-inflammatory diet for your body at this stage of your life is what I think that you should be doing. Some people with lipedema will find that a Mediterranean diet is what works best for them. For me, I eat a lot of meat. I have a primarily animal-based diet, but then I support it with as many fruits and vegetables and plants and variety as possible. I try to make sure that everything I eat is organic, regenerative, local. These are all the things that I do to just get the most nutrient density and biodiversity for my gut microbiome as possible, because I know that that's what's going to help prevent inflammation in my body. However, many years ago, I was completely addicted to sugar. And if I had tried to eat the way I eat now back then, there's no way I would have been able to do it because I was so addicted to sugar that I was afraid to eat fruit because fruit would send me on a crazy binge eating spiral. So especially in the lipedema community, there are so many women who have disordered eating patterns. So I would say just find what works for your body. It might not work for everybody and it might not be the thing that you want to be on forever. But if you can find something that helps you either heal your relationship with food, help reduce inflammation in your body, ingest fewer toxins than you were before, I just think it's all about that. Find the thing that works for you. Find the thing that is not bombarding your body with an unnecessary load of toxins and chemicals every day and stick with it and adapt and evolve and change it as you grow up and as your body experiences different seasons and different types of nutritional needs. The next one on this list is a GLP-1. GLP-1s are weight loss peptides. This is a very controversial topic. And my philosophy in general with everything on this podcast is about informed consent. And I think right now with the peptide conversation, there are so many people that say we don't know enough about them. There's so many people that say it's completely safe. There's so many people who say that it's completely dangerous. And you're going to find people in every single camp. So my philosophy on this podcast for every topic we cover is that I think everyone should be able to do whatever they want with their own body as long as they are feeling like they're well informed about it. I think peptides are enough of a conversation now that you have enough information to make a decision for yourself. I don't think anyone should be forced onto a peptide. I don't think anyone should be prevented from trying one if you want to try one, if you're an adult. Adults, you can make your own decision about your body. So I'm not here to tell you that you should or should not try a peptide. I'm just going to provide my perspective on what's worked for me and what I've thought about. So with GLP-1 peptides, tirzepatide is the one that most of the women with lipedema are seeing really good success with. It is also known as Zepbound. I am pretty sure that the GLP-1, the original, the Ozempic, I think Ozempic is the same as Wegovy. That one is supposedly not as effective in lipedema bodies as tirzepatide. And a big reason for that is because tirzepatide, Zepbound, is going to reduce your inflammation in your body. And like I said, lipedema is an inflammatory condition. It is influenced by inflammation. So if you are somebody that would like to try a peptide, GLP-1s, tirzepatide specifically, has really changed so many lives of people with lipedema. In my personal journey, I did start microdosing tirzepatide. So the starting dose that the doctors will give you is 2.5 milligrams once a week. I started taking 0.5 milligrams once a week, and I noticed a dramatic difference in the pain of my legs and the swelling. My lipedema, it looked like it vanished. I was amazed. It actually made such a huge difference. I didn't have any side effects. I didn't have any appetite changes. I was still pretty hungry all the time, thinking about food all the time. It did make protein a little bit less appetizing for me, but that didn't last very long. And after taking 0.5 milligrams for probably like 5 months, I actually noticed that my body wasn't really responding to it anymore. So 5 months or so on this microdose, and I needed to increase the dose, which is kind of scary to me because I don't want to be on a peptide forever. Like I had already been on it for 5 months on 0.5 milligrams, and then suddenly 0.5 milligrams felt like nothing. So I was like, well, if I go to 1 milligram, then that's going to also feel like nothing eventually. And then like, am I just going to keep increasing forever? So that didn't seem like the right move for me. But for other people, I've heard that you get to your full dose and then that's enough and you get to like have your maintenance dose or something. On my health journey, I just like don't want to be on medication. I don't want to be taking stuff. I know that my body has the ability to heal itself. And right now I'm just dealing with this inflammatory condition that is causing my body to have more inflammation. So I don't know. Like I'm totally on the fence about this. I feel like on the one hand, it's really nice to not have all my symptoms. Like the GLP was helping with my MCAS symptoms, my histamine symptoms. It was helping me with like my mold symptoms and my joint pain, my nerve pain. So like it was like helping with everything. But then you're on a medication. So I don't know. On that one I'm talking about it because it's important to talk about. It makes a huge difference in lipedema, but it does come with unknowns. It does come with risks. It is something that everybody has to make a decision about for themselves. And a lot of times you have to pay out of pocket. So I don't know what the peptide world will look like in a couple of years. It's all still very new, but I do know that taking the microdose of the tirzepatide was hugely helpful for me. Next on the list for supporting my body and reducing inflammation in my body is strength training. This is something that's so important because if you have lipedema in your legs and your arms, you are going to want to build as much muscle underneath that lipedema as possible. There are so many studies that show that muscle is going to improve your longevity. Muscle is good for insulin. Muscle is just so important for every aspect of health. And when you have lipedema, it is harder to build muscle. And my understanding is that this is because your lipedema nodules are like fused to the muscle and the fascia and stuff. So like when you want to build muscle, the lipedema is in the way. And then the other aspect of building muscle with lipedema is that, like I said, lipedema is influenced by inflammation. And in order to build muscle, you do have to create some inflammation in your body. So the key to building muscle with lipedema is to find the level of inflammation that your body can tolerate in order to build some muscle without creating so much inflammation that you create an inflammatory storm that causes your lipedema to worsen. So this is a very delicate dance. It takes some time to get used to. For me, I've been on my weightlifting journey for about 3 years now with a trainer. It's been the same trainer the whole time. And we've gone through all sorts of ebbs and flows of figuring out what works for me. Right now, what seems to be the key to me building muscle without causing the lipedema to worsen is I do what's called leaving 3 reps in reserve, which means I'm still increasing my weight every week. I'm still lifting heavier and heavier over time, but I don't lift to failure. I'm not pushing my body to its absolute limit because when I did that, it was causing so much inflammation in my body that I wasn't building any muscle anyway, because every time I would lift really heavy, it would cause inflammation in my body. And the inflammation would cause the lipedema to worsen versus having muscle being built like it's designed to do. So everybody's going to have their different journey with exercise, but I think the key is to make sure that you're not spiking your cortisol, you're not overdoing it, you're doing it in a way that is minimizing inflammation as much as possible. A lot of women will find that Pilates is a great way to do strength training because it's low impact. And for a lot of it, your legs are up in the air, which is just like built-in lymphatic drainage. So I loved doing Pilates. I think Pilates is a great way to build muscle if you're in a lipedema body, but just make sure that you're also like eventually working your way up to progressive overload. You want to always be lifting heavier and heavier over time so that you are building more muscle. And then the last thing on this list in terms of just reducing inflammation in your body is actually trauma therapy. So there is a connection between lipedema and trauma. If you've listened to my podcast, you know that I talk about this in other episodes. Trauma has been such a big part of my healing journey because I'm somebody that I didn't know I had any trauma. Nothing horrible has ever happened to me. I've had a very beautiful life. I had a happy childhood. I had so much in my life that I felt grateful for. So I didn't think I had anything traumatic happen to me. However, I am a highly sensitive person. So it turns out I did have a lot of trauma in my body that was being stored, and I didn't even know that that was possible. So, if you're listening to this and you're someone that you think you have no trauma, I do encourage you to look into it. There's an excellent book called The Body Keeps the Score. That's a pretty popular one. And just think about how your nervous system reacts to the world around you. I used to have so much fawn response, FAWN, fawn response. That was my way of interacting with the world because I didn't realize I had trauma. I was just trying to appease everybody. If you've never heard of fawn response, it's basically believing that the price of admission to any relationship is the forfeiture of your own needs, boundaries, desires, things like that. So basically, it's kind of like people pleasing, but it's more passive. And that's how I lived my whole life. And it's teaching my body that my own needs don't matter. So trauma therapy has been hugely helpful for this. Something called IFS, internal family systems, has really helped my body relax, and it's reduced inflammation in my body because I'm not constantly stressed and worried about things. I have healed a lot of my trauma that I didn't know was causing me pain, but it was, and it's made a huge difference. So that concludes my list of all the things that I'm doing to help support my body, to support my lymphatic system, and make sure that I am doing everything that I can to improve my lipedema, to reduce inflammation as much as possible, and to make sure that my body is not creating an inflammatory environment for the lipedema to thrive in. And doing all of these practices has made a tremendous difference in the appearance of my lipedema. It has made a tremendous difference in the texture. I've built so much muscle underneath all the lipedema. I'm really proud of that. I've worked incredibly hard to build this muscle because I know it's so good for me. I'm so proud of myself for doing all of these things regularly for the past couple of years. And it has dramatically transformed my legs. I've lost inches in circumference, and I feel like I am healthier because of it. Unfortunately, in my case, I am still having very severe pain in my lower legs. This is pain that I didn't used to have. So even though my legs are looking a lot better and I've come a long way in how much I've improved the lipedema appearance, the texture, the size, unfortunately, the pain is still pretty bad. And I am having trouble sleeping at night because my legs are throbbing. My swelling is like out of control. And my legs are just feeling so heavy all the time that it's impacting my mobility. I can't go on walks because my legs are just like hurting the whole time. I'm wearing this thick compression all the time, even in the summer heat in Texas. And for me, this has just become unsustainable. So I'm really grateful that I've proven to myself that all these practices can make a dramatic difference. Like truly a tremendous transformation has happened in my legs because of all of these practices that I just talked about. And I'm so proud of that. However, I also realize that I am 32 years old and I want to have a life without restriction. I don't want to be so limited in my mobility. I want to travel. I want to walk around. I want to exercise. I want to do all these things without pain all the time. And I want to sleep at night without waking up with throbbing, aching, restless legs. So I have chosen to get a lipedema removal surgery, and I'm going to actually be having my first surgery next week. This is something that not everybody has to do, and not everybody has access to surgery. So I feel incredibly lucky that I have the access to this surgery. I feel incredibly lucky that I have friends who can go with me to take care of me while I'm going. I found an incredible surgeon. I feel grateful for all of the opportunity and privilege that I have in being able to have this surgery. And the irony is that a lot of people will look at my legs and be like, wow, your legs look fantastic. Why are you having surgery? Why do you need surgery? Your legs look great. And that's because a lot of women with lipedema have legs that don't look so great. And the narrative has become around appearance. But lipedema is so much more than a cosmetic issue. This is not a cosmetic issue. This is a quality of life issue. women with lipedema can be experiencing debilitating pain every day, every night. Their whole lives are different because of the lipedema in their legs, in their arms. This is affecting the way that they build muscle, the way that they show up for their families, the way that they care for their kids. This is not an aesthetics issue. So I know it's frustrating when you have a body that doesn't look how you would expect it to look based on the effort that you put in to taking care of it. I know what that's like, and it's disappointing, but it's still so important to realize that lipedema surgery is not about appearance. Of course, you want your body to look good, but to have the surgery is not always driven by wanting to look good, because people comment about my legs all the time and they're like, your legs look so good. Why would you have surgery? Why would you go through all of that? And I'm thinking in my head, like, I go through this every day. Every day of my life, I am experiencing heavy legs and pain. I'm in pain all the time. So my question is like, why would I go through that? Why wouldn't I go through surgery? So I'm really lucky to have the opportunity to have this surgery. A lot of people say that once they've removed some of the lipedema from their body, the rest of the lipedema improves because you're not experiencing so much inflammation, because all these nodules are causing more inflammation in your body, which means that it's going to create an environment for lipedema just because you have lipedema. So I'm really excited. I'm going to be going to Dr. Sue in Tampa, Florida. This is going to be my first surgery. The first one is from my ankles to a little bit above my knees. In Florida, they have a requirement you can only take out 4 liters of tissue, and that's kind of a lot. So I don't know if they'll be able to take out more. I did submit this to my health insurance and they denied it. So now I have to submit an appeal because this is a medically necessary surgery for me. And I felt like it was important to do this episode while I still am experiencing all of these symptoms, because even though I'm choosing to have surgery, not everybody has this opportunity to have surgery. A lot of people cannot afford it. A lot of people don't have insurance coverage. A lot of people have kids they have to take care of. They don't have the ability to take time out of their lives to have this surgery. So I feel incredibly grateful. I'm so excited for the surgery, and I can't wait to have legs that are pain-free. So that concludes today's episode. I hope there was something that was helpful in here for you. If you have lipedema and you've been experiencing some of the same stuff that I described on today's episode, please make sure you comment, share this with a friend. I really want to make sure that we are talking about lipedema. This is such an important condition to speak about. So many women are experiencing these same things and just think that they're defective. They think that it's their own fault that they're not losing weight. They think that it's normal to have your legs feel like they're filled with cement. And it's not normal. So we have to talk about it. I would really appreciate your support on this episode. Please like, subscribe, follow along, share with a friend, and let me know what was most helpful. My goal is to do several more episodes on lipedema specifically coming up. So if you have questions on things that I did not cover, let me know in the comments or send me a DM, and I'd be happy to cover those on a future episode. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.